have in our midst the Ghana's country senior officer in Nokia Networks in March 2016 is Mr. Rami Hashem, after the acquisition of the Alcatel loosened by Nokia Networks. He's previously worked in different parts of the world. Ladies and gentlemen, with a round of applause, let's welcome Rami for the first part of this presentation.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Rami Hashem. I'm Nokia Managing Director. And I'd like to thank the chairman here for inviting us for this presentation, Dr. Yao Akutu. And it was a very nice presentation at the very beginning. I will continue on the networks that unlocks possibilities. I've prepared a couple of presentations for 20 minutes. And if you can activate, please. It's a human right, and indeed it is. It's actually beyond that. It's a necessity today in our daily life. You go to a coffee shop, and the first thing you'll be asking for is Wi-Fi, right? Before even eating, before finding a shelter, before sleeping, you are always looking for Wi-Fi. And Wi-Fi presents actually this broadband concept. So as Nokia, actually here, we have been here for 20 years. Where it is, where the developed countries are and where the emerging countries are. Actually, from this map, you can see, for example, in the United States and Europe, it's quite lightened up with lights. And when I take my flight from Ghana all the way to Dubai, like 8 hours flight, and it's an evening flight, I like always looking from my window and looking at the city lights. But what does it tell me? I always imagine how the fiber is penetrated into those cities. The lights and the electricities, it shows the development not only of countries, but it shows the development of broadband. And broadband is one essential concept that shows how those countries are developed. So as Nokia and Dr. Thomas, he mentioned about creating and inventing the fiber. We have been actually building this fiber worldwide. We have built more than 550,000 kilometers of fiber, sub-oceans. So you have those fiber lights connecting all the worldwide continents and carrying a lot of terabytes. And one of those realities is, if you're doing any internet session, 99% possibility that it's going through Nokia equipment. Because we have those fiber worldwide that is communicating the whole continent, but as well all our routers in the internet exchange is Nokia's routers. And what does it tell us? When it comes to the broadband, I do believe that fiber is essential to develop the broadband. The deeper the fiber is, the more broadband you can get, right? So if the fiber today is landing at the landing stations of Accra, it's at the border of Ghana. The deeper you implement and you deepen those builds of the infrastructure, you will have broadband, not only 1 megabit and 2 megabit, but you can go up to hundreds and gigabit of data. Just to give you one example, summer this year, we have done with Facebook a connectivity from New Jersey all the way to Ireland. On a single fiber, we have been carrying 13 terabit of information. 13 terabit per second of information. What does it present? If today Ghana, as a whole traffic, we are doing something like 20 gigabit per second, this is carrying the whole traffic of Africa on a single fiber. This is carrying on a single fiber, you can carry 3 million people simultaneously doing video, simultaneously doing high definition video on a single fiber. You can imagine those possibilities that you are having. How can we unlock it to enable the country to develop further? And I'm going to speak to you about this in the coming slides. Next slide, please. In this slide, I have one bad news, and one challenge, and one opportunity. The bad news is Africa, we are not doing that well in terms of fiber to the home. It's 89% of our homes are not connected to the internet. This is for the whole African continent. And this is the worst among all the different continents, right? Even Europe and the US, they're not doing a good job. Still 20 to 30% of their homes are not connected. Why? Because of remote access or difficulty to build the fiber infrastructure to rural areas. And we're going to touch on that. And what is the challenge? The challenge is between urban, most of the operators will invest in the urban area. Why? Because this is where the money is. So I invest, I have a huge population, and then I can enable people to enjoy the broadband services. But on the opposite side, on the rural area, very few people, the money is not there, and the investment is becoming a highly capital investment to connect those people. So between operators and private investors and between government, they need to work together to build this infrastructure, to improve that broadband at home. Next slide. This is just to challenge, it's a teaser actually, the European Commission, and they have laid a roadmap in terms of broadband connectivity. Like back in 2012, they set the target for 2020 target. And what is this target? 30 megabit per second for all the population in the European Union, and 50% of the population having 100 megabit per second. Where are we today as Ghana? I believe less than 1 megs probably, right? They have recently revised this agenda to look at the 2025. So what did they develop? They said 100% of the population should get 100 megabit per second, right? And for schools and businesses and enterprises and so on, will go for a gigabit. This is what they call a gigabit city. So this is one thing of the agenda from the broadband forum here. What is broadband? How can we define broadband? Is it 1, is it 10, is it 30, is it 100? And not only define it for today, but define a target for the next 10 to 20 years. And ensure that all the players in the market, they are buying into this target. They are going towards achieving those targets by the milestones. But as well, they have indicated the 5G. And they're saying the 5G, you know, I mean, we're just talking about the 4G today, but 5G as well is becoming a reality by 2020, and this is not far. We are talking about 2 years from now. And they're saying by 2020, they want to have one major city in every country having 5G coverage. By 2025, having the 5G connecting all the European countries. This is just a teaser. But then when you look at the ITU definition for the broadband, they are saying above 1.5 megabit per second, right? And they are going to revise it very soon to show either 4 or 5 megabit per second connectivity. Actually, the FCC in the US, they have revised this, and they have defined broadband as 5 megabit per second. Next slide. 5G. Actually, when I presented to our team some about the 5G, they're saying, why 5G? We didn't yet deploy 4G in country, and what does 5G bring to us? The point is 5G concept is built around machine to machine. It's built about IoT. It's built about smart cities. It's not about human anymore that they're building the 5G. The biggest use case of 5G today, guess what? It's connected cars. And because each of us will be holding 10 devices, it means that the 7 billion people of the world today, they will carry 70 billion things to be connected. And this is the whole design concept of the 5G. How can we build a network that will sustain 10 times the capacity that we're having today, with technology like massive MIMO and millimeter wave and so on, and carrying huge traffic with less battery and power consumption? Because if I'm connecting things, I want to make sure that those battery will be sustained not only for a couple of, well, days today or weeks, but we're looking for years. They're looking for 10 years of battery life for connecting the machine to machine, and this is narrowband IoT. So all of those concepts is an integral part of a smart city. It's an integral part of the development of our countries. Next. This is what I talk, like today broadband, we are seeing it as for our human connectivity, for our customer experience, for getting access to the internet, but it's more than that. It's about applications, it's about use cases, it's about smart city concept. And smart city is how to get better people, healthier people, better quality of life. And how this is enabled? It's enabled through an IoT things. Imagine here for Ghana, I was challenged as well. What are the use cases that will apply for Ghana? Is it connected cars, self-driving cars? I doubt. I don't believe it for now, at least, for the short term. But there are very interesting use cases of waste management, of smart grids, of public safety. And this is enabled by those technologies of 5G. So let's look on the next slide. On the availability of portfolio from suppliers today to connect from urban to suburban to rural. How are we going to apply it? Today, the fixed and wireless, when I started 20 years ago in the telecom, there was a borderline between fixed and wireless. It was two separate words. Today, the borderline is not clear anymore. It's merging together as one. The fixed cannot work without the wireless. Wireless cannot work without the fixed. They need each other to evolve. And if we're talking about broadband, and I'm sorry to say that, but the mobile penetration today, it's very high compared to the fixed penetration. And we need to develop the fixed infrastructure, which is basically the fiber infrastructure, to develop the mobile applications, to develop the connectivity to the people. And if we're talking about the 5G, it's about fiber connection. I cannot imagine that you have a cell site of 5G base station without going through all the way fiber to this base station. So we need to prepare from today for this upcoming 5G. Maybe it will come in 5 years, maybe it will come in 10 years, but if we not start developing the infrastructure from today, we're not ready for the 5G. This is the reality today. So if you look at the portfolio, if I look at urbans and so on, rural areas, the rural areas is mostly wireless. Why that? The people are not concentrated in certain areas, and you need huge coverage of the wireless. So the fact they mentioned the U900, and it's a very good step actually towards rural coverage, because the coverage is more than double or even triple the 2G. This will enable the broadband into the rural areas. But as well, how can we look into the 4G and 5G in a lower spectrum? Maybe we're talking about 450 megahertz, about 700 megahertz to improve the coverage of the LTE and the 5G. When it comes to the urban, it's not only about fiber again. Yes, fiber is very important, fiber to the home. This will enable the 30 megabit per second and 100 megabit per second. But the most costly element of it is the fiber to the drop point. It's from the drop point of the fiber all the way to the houses. This is very complicated, and it can be 40% of your CapEx spending. So how can we use the 5G technology? Maybe, yes, 5G is far-fetched from now, but 5G, they have a very beautiful technology that will connect a gigabit connectivity over the air. Instead of extending the fiber to the homes, you can actually leverage the 5G technology to go with a gigabit connectivity to the home. Next slide. I'm very happy that even the minister, she touched on that, the common infrastructure. I truly believe that this is the way forward. And Ghana, you have been leading in towards tower sharing. Why don't we do passive sharing as well for the fiber? Commonly, instead of having adjacent fibers and each operator, an ISP, is investing in fiber, and this is very costly, you have one common infrastructure and you divide your investment by 5 or by 6 or by 10. Then it becomes very affordable to the end users, right? So what is the technology behind it? Yes, there is passive infrastructure, and that can be one operator who is responsible for the passive, renting and leasing it to the others. Active layer, where you have all your routers and DWDM layer. And then on top, you can have another player, which is only service-oriented, focusing on customers to connect those customers with internet. This is one model. The other model is active sharing, where you have one operator and service provider offering the market the active and the passive elements as a common. And then you have the service operators, and so on and so on. I mean, you have various types of models. But this is the way to divide the capital investment over 5 or even more. And this is word proven. I mean, we have been participating in Australia, for example, what they have called NBN, National Broadband Network. And what is it about? It's a 5 billion fund that is developing the fiber in the country. And then all the operators are making use out of it. And not only Australia, they have done it, New Zealand as well, India now they are doing it, Malaysia they are doing it, Mexico they are doing it. Why don't we do it here? Next. This is what I told you about the 5G to the home, and it's available today. What is it? It takes from the drop point to the house, and you can see here, it's a wireless connection from the pole, the light poles of the streets to the homes. And you can go up to 1.5 gigabit per second. And then it's not only about this connection only, but it rather communicates in a meshed network. Okay, so you drop actually the fiber here to this pole, and afterwards it communicates to the other poles. So it's a matched kind of topology that will enable this gigabit experience. Next. Just to remind you that, again, fixed and wireless is not a clear cut. And if we're developing networks, we need to look at all the tools available. We need to look at the wireless, we need to look at the fixed, and each has its pros and cons. If I look at the fiber to the home today, between high speed, low power, and low maintenance, this is the best technology in the market. But if I look in other dimensions like low capex, fast time to market, definitely it's not. The 5G and the wireless will be beating the fixed networks into that. So it's a mix, again. It depends on the use cases in the market, how to use all those toolboxes to develop the broadband in country. Next. But we have to think about not only and I started my presentation with Wi-Fi. Wi-Fi, it's the last mile to the user. Yes, there is 3G, of course, and 4G and 5G, but at home, it's the Wi-Fi. And we have to think about the Wi-Fi and how to close this value chain from the operators to the user. And the Wi-Fi, it plays a very important role. Wi-Fi, if you are not managing it well, actually, it can break the whole value chain. One call of Wi-Fi, like a break of Wi-Fi, can cost the operators $26 per call to resolve the issue. And why that? Because you might need to send a technician, chain the Wi-Fi, and so on. So how to think about revamping the Wi-Fi with self-optimizing capabilities. Self-optimizing, self-healing, automatic plug and play, and so on. And bringing all the information, what we call carrier-grade Wi-Fi, bringing all the information of the users and analyzing it in a big data. Then the operators and ISPs can make use out of those data analytics. So this is something that we need to keep in mind, that Wi-Fi to the homes is very important in this value chain. Next slide. So about Nokia, we have been doing this broadband with 49 out of the 50 biggest operators worldwide, starting with Verizon, AT&T, even in China, in India, and so on. And we have been the first actually to introduce the gigabyte and terabyte information over the fiber lines. We have been innovating in terms of 4.9G Pro. 4.9, it's just at standard before the 5G to enable above 1 gigabit per second capacity. If today we're talking about the 4G, it gives probably 100 meg, 150 megs. The 4.9G will give 1 gig and above. As well, on the fixed network, not only on the wireless, but on the fixed networks, we were the first to introduce 40 gigabit PON. So that is giving to the users 40 gig. Believe it or not, yeah, this is the case. And we are still innovating in terms of copper. Because if you have the last mile in copper and you have difficulty to extend fiber, you can use the copper, existing copper, to deliver even gigabit capacity to the users. And this is done across enterprises, across homes and cables. It's very important to look at the whole ecosystem for delivering the broadband. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much, Rami, for that. Don't go yet. We have a couple of time for questions to be asked. Anybody who would like to ask a question on the presentation, we have 5 minutes to do that, and then we can move on to the next presentation.
Thank you very much. My name is David Go from the Institute of ICT Professional. I want to find out, with the 5G, do we have the devices now? Because currently, I think the devices we have, they are not 5G compatible.
Yes.
Qualcomm recently announced that they have 1 gigabit device, but do we have the devices in the market? Or are the developers actually developing the devices?
No, the short answer is no. They're still working on the standards at 3GPP. So you will not find any devices so far, and the ecosystem is not ready. But what they are doing workarounds to find CPEs that will connect the home with the 5G base station before even the ecosystem is ready and before the standards being ready.
Any other? Okay.
Okay, my name is Fred Yabua. I'm from the Kofi Annan ICT Center. Given our situation in Ghana, and from all the technologies you talk about, 5G, 4G, all of them, which combination of technologies will give us a faster way of broadening our spread to each home in Ghana within, say, 3 years?
Fiber is essential for the broadband, and inside the urban areas, you need to have fiber, deep fiber penetration into the urban areas. But if I look at the rural, you can look at different technologies like long-haul microwave that carries more than 10 gigabit per second on a single link for 100 kilometers, one hop. So looking at a combination between fiber and long-haul microwave, this is the way to enable the broadband at the last mile.
Any other question? Any lady to ask a question, so we'll create some balance. Any lady? Any lady? Any lady? Okay. I think that will be all for this session. Please let's give Rami a round of applause. Thank you very much. I understand that we have free internet service in the hall provided by Surfline. Do we have it set up yet? It is? Okay. So you give us the password, and then we can all log in and have a feel of how fast Surfline really is. Okay. So, ladies and gentlemen, you're reminded that the event is sponsored by Greatco, Broadband over Powerline. Okay. Thank you very much, Greatco, and of course to Surfline as well, and all other participating companies. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll move on to the second part of the presentation, and that has to do with a better way to connect. A better way to connect. And I'm going to call on Kweku Agbesi to help with that presentation. Kweku Agbesi is with C Squared. I believe those of you who have the brochure, you have the profile of Mr. Agbesi copiously written in there. Please, let's welcome him with a round of applause. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the beautiful, what do I call it, introduction. Right, sorry, I'm just waiting for my slides to come up. Are we ready yet? Sorry, my presentation slides for C Squared. For inviting C Squared to give a presentation on what we do here in Ghana. With the introduction, my name is actually Kweku Agbesi, so I'm the Chief Sales and Marketing Officer for C Squared. There's a bit of C Squared already in the brochure, but just to give you a bit of background on the company. So C Squared was a company set up by Google sometime in 2015 to deploy fiber infrastructure across the whole of Africa. So we started with Uganda and in Ghana, and then our third country is Liberia at the moment. Sometime this year, Google decided to bring other partners in to help us to deploy our fiber faster on the continent. So at the moment, we've partnered with 3 other companies, namely IFC, which is part of the World Bank, Mitsui, which is a Japanese infrastructure company. They invest mostly in infrastructure networks, and a company from South Africa called Convergence Partners. And Convergence Partners are also a telecom infrastructure company, or well, an investment company which invests predominantly in the telecom space. Next slide, please. So there's a statement here on this slide which talks about access to information and communication being a basic human right, which is one of the mantras at C Squared actually. So I'm sure none of us in this room need to be convinced of this statement. So for us, just like access to the facilities like water, electricity, education, we think that access to the internet is a basic human right. In 2017, the world will mark a significant milestone: 50% global internet penetration in the world. So you agree with me that it's both a good thing that internet penetration is increasing, but then again, we've got quite a long way to go, because it means that there are still about half of the world's population who do not have access to the internet. So basically what is happening is this will mark the first time that the world has been, or the scales have tipped, so that the world is becoming more and more connected. But you agree with me that there's still more to be done. Mostly women and children are the ones who are suffering from the fact that there's no internet. Okay, so these people are being left further behind as the digital revolution steams ahead. Last year, the global community recognized the importance of digital equality for socio-economic growth and set a target as part of the new SDG set by the United Nations, Universal Access by 2020. The bad news is that without any urgent policy action, we will miss this target by over 20 years, which means that by 2020, a lot more people should be connected to the internet. But at this rate, 20 years from now, we may still not be able to achieve those targets. High connectivity still remains one of the biggest obstacles to achieving the Universal Access Pledge. I always give this example of when I used to live in the UK. With $50, I was able to get triple play, i.e. digital TV, internet, and then a telephone. I'm back in Ghana now. My internet alone costs $50. So that says it all really, that the cost of internet here in Africa is so high that we are, making it difficult for people to get affordable internet. Okay, so we know that broadband prices are coming down, but they are not falling fast enough, okay, leaving a lot of low-income earners and other marginalized populations unable to afford even a basic connection. Furthermore, our research shows that the pace of policy change has been far too slow. And the good news, well, for Ghana is the internet penetration is going up. We are at 34%, but that is nowhere near the world average of 50%. So I think you'll agree with me that we have quite a long way to go. Next slide, please. So that graph there shows exactly what I was talking about earlier when it comes to the cost of internet. So look at Africa, compared to other continents all over the world. So we started off at a cost of what, maybe about 30% of our per capita income, and it's gone down to maybe about 17%. But let's look at North America, right at my extreme right. North America is our 0.5% of their GNI. I think for me that says it all really. And you realize that internet access in general is a catalyst for economic growth. Okay, and it's a precondition for people to participate in government and society. Poor and marginalized populations arguably stand to gain the most. On the other hand, a world in which only the affluent enjoy the benefits of connectivity is a world in which inequality will quickly deepen. For these reasons, among many others, the UN Sustainable Development Goals includes a target to achieve universal affordable internet for all by 2020. So basically what we are trying to say is cost of internet here in Africa is expensive. We here in this room, it's a responsibility for all of us to try and get those prices down to the levels of the North Americas and the Europes and the Latin Americas. Next slide, please. So how do we achieve that? One of the things that we advocate for is what we call shared infrastructure, which simply means that, look, sharing the infrastructure that we already have. Now, infrastructure could be a road, it could be electricity, it could be water. Now, the example I give all the time to make it easier for people to understand is, if you have a road, okay, why can't we all use that road instead of someone else coming and building another road on top of an existing road before we drive on it? Isn't that waste of resources where that road could, or those resources, or the money spent on building that extra road or that extra layer on top of an existing road could be built elsewhere where there are no road access? And that's the same way we think about infrastructure. So a lot of ISPs, MNOs are building a lot of fiber within Ghana at the moment in locations where there are other fiber, or there are other services providers providing that same fiber, in the same location. So I guess the point I'm trying to make is, instead of building those fiber in locations where fiber already exists, it's probably best to build that fiber elsewhere. That graph here shows, for example, that if you have a wholesale fiber infrastructure company that has built fiber in predominantly most of the country, then all the operators, ISPs and MNOs alike, can share the same fiber. The typical model we have at the moment is a lot of the operators are looking to build their own fiber. Now, you agree with me that that is not the best or the most sufficient way of deploying infrastructure in the country, because obviously there are issues to do with the environment as well, people digging up everywhere, and it becomes a nuisance, to be honest. So we are been working with the NCA, for example, to help to get the information out there that shared infrastructure is the way to go, similar to what they did with the towers in the country as well. We need to take action to promote infrastructure and resource sharing. Sharing is not easy, but with clear policy incentives and regulatory certainty, it provides operators the best option to reduce the cost of service provision while also maintaining a healthy stream of revenue from market growth. The government obviously has a critical role to play in facilitating and incentivizing resource sharing among market players. So does the private sector. Next slide, please. So this is where C-Square comes in as a dedicated wholesale infrastructure provider. The solution might be different in different countries either in Uganda, Ghana, or Liberia, where we have presence at the moment. But we feel that a wholesale shared metro network is a critical gap that needs to be addressed. For Ghana specifically, we have 5 submarine cables and quite expensive inner city rings. And while there is some metro fiber built by various telcos, this has largely been built to meet their own needs. C-Squared is building a dense, robust network available for all service providers. So I guess the point we're making here is our shared infrastructure that we are providing at the moment is not restricted to just one company. Any ISP, licensed ISP, or MNO can ride on our fiber to provide internet to the end user. Next slide, please. This page talks a bit about the fiber that we deploy. So those who are very tech-minded will understand a bit about this. So we have what we call a mesh design. A mesh design is very highly resilient and self-healing. We are deploying the latest passive and active network technology, and I'm proud to say that Nokia is one of our partners in deploying this. We use high-density fiber cables and ducts. We design for reliability and upgradability. Our SLAs for our least capacity product, which is our flagship product, is 99.99%. What that means in layman terms is we don't expect our network to be down for more than 4.32 minutes in any calendar month. If we exceed that 4.32 minutes, we pay our customers service credits. And I think we have a few of our customers here who can attest to the fact that we've probably never paid them any service credits, or if we have, it's very minimal. So we stick to those SLAs. Next slide, please. And sorry, before we go, we have a 24/7 monitoring service who are always available to see to our customers if there are any problems with our network. So this slide talks about exactly what we are trying to do with our fiber. So we obviously want to transform metros, okay, and that can be done through digitized businesses. When small and large business owners are able to access a fast, reliable internet connection, they'll be able not to only transform their respective businesses, but also to store data in the cloud, digitize bookkeeping, enabling e-payments, and use online platforms. For the reduced cost, supply and demand can be optimized through digital platforms. Example, agriculture prices. Traders can engage in commerce across the country. Consumers will know true market value of goods. In improved transportation and logistics, companies that can track their fleet vehicles with open APIs and other software platforms, large amounts of workforce can effectively work from home. E-commerce platforms can increase the effectiveness and efficiency in delivering goods. Smart grids, utility companies can set up smart meters to help consumers effectively monitor and optimize consumption. Traffic lights can be dynamically set to optimize for daytime. And we have some improved security as well through business and homeowners setting up CCTVs in their houses for their security systems. So these are all examples of what you could do with a reliable internet provision. Next slide. So I'm going to talk a bit about some of the things that we've done at C-Squared to date. Next slide, please. So in Ghana, we have over 850 kilometers of fiber with over 2,300 handles. We have 20 signed customers, top of the MNOs. So we have the likes of MTN and soon Vodafone, who are going to be our customer as well. We've got all the new 4G entrants, Surfline and Busy are our customers. And many of the ISPs are our customers as well. And we have over 200 plus customer sites that we've connected to date. Next slide. Similarly, in Uganda, we have a similar situation, over 100 kilometers of fiber built, over 2,300 handholds. We have over 1,000 customer sites, serving over 2 million people, 16 signed customers. 2 out of those 3 are top MNOs in Uganda. The new 4G entrants and many of the ISPs are our customers. This here is just a few quotes from some of our customers on the quality of the service that we provide. I'm not going to read through all of them, but I just want to pick out a couple. So I'm going to talk about the CTO of Vodafone Uganda. His name is Jerry Sebali, and this is what he says. He said, look, with C-Squared, operators can focus on their core business. And this is just talking about the fact that our shared infrastructure is the way to go. This presents an opportunity for more products like video on the go, currently on demand. To the bottom left-hand corner is a quote from Praveen Sadalaj, who is the CEO of BZ. And he said, with C Squared, we are consistently able to meet and exceed our consumer and business customer expectations of reliability and quality, helping us to grow and position Busy as the preferred 4G data provider. So a couple of quotes just to get people to know a bit about what our customers are saying about us. Next slide. So just to summarize what I've talked about so far, we are here to help increase the access to internet. And we need the support of all these partners to make sure that we become a success. So government and regulators are definitely important in our success. The operators are our partners. Without them, we cannot exist. Investors and ecosystems and entrepreneurs are also part of this ecosystem, which will help us to grow infrastructure in the region and ultimately make internet more affordable. So this brings me to the end of my presentation, and I'm here to answer any questions at all that people may have about C Squared or fiber infrastructure in general.
Thank you. Let's give him a round of applause. First question. Please, you would kindly stand when you are asking the question, just so our cameras can capture you, please.
Okay, my name is Fred again.
Hello, Fred.
You made mention that high cost of connectivity is affecting the way we want things to be done.
Agreed.
Especially in our country. You also made mention that shared infrastructure is the best way to go. From your experience on the African continent, I want to seek your opinion. Do you think policy is the best way for us to go with respect to shared infrastructure? Because in your presentation, although you said shared infrastructure is the best way, you are also creating your own infrastructure while we have the Ghana backbone fiber also in existence. So it's like you are preaching something and then you are saying something different. So if you can clarify that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Fred. Okay, so you're right. Yes, there is a shared backbone. But the main reason why Google, which is the company we started this project here in Ghana in the first place, was at the time when we started this project, we realized that there was a lot of bandwidth along the coast. Okay, but that bandwidth wasn't being brought to the cities where the internet was actually required. And that is what drove Google to start this whole project in the first place. So the backbone, yes, is for interconnectivity between cities, but what we are trying to do is to get people, even within the metropolis, to get access to the internet. So I hope that answers your first question. So that is what we started in the first place. Now, the next question about policy, yes, I sincerely believe that government policy is the way to go. They did a very good job with infrastructure sharing when it comes to the towers, because initially all the MNOs were building their own towers, and you agree with me that there was a proliferation of towers in the country. So with this policy set in place, we now have the tower companies who build or who own the towers now, and you realize that there's less clutter in our country, and I think that's the way to go with the shared infrastructure when it comes to fiber as well.
Do we have any question for Koku to answer?
I think there's one here.
Okay.
My name is Kukusam. I'm from the Institute of ICT Professionals. I want to find out if you do have fiber cuts, and how do you manage the fiber?
Yeah, so that's a good question. Yes, we do have fiber cuts because Ghana being the developing country it is, there's a lot of construction work going on. So there are times when you are called out. The good thing about our network is we have, as I said, we have a 24/7 monitoring service. So a lot of that is monitored by our team of technicians who work 24/7. So when we get a fiber cut, we get a notification on our screen, and then we send our deployment team. Normally our response time is 15 minutes, and we get people out there to go and fix the fiber cut. So that's how we deal with the problem.
Any other question, please? Okay.
Victor Dodu, MTN. just by way of contribution, there is some level of fiber sharing in Ghana already. There's sharing between MTN and Tigo, MTN and Vodafone, just as a contribution. My question has to do with the duplication of infrastructure. In your submission, it was clear we should not be doing that. But at the time Google entered the market, Accra and Kumasi, for instance, has fiber from at least 4 operators. Then Google built the 5th one. So if duplication is not good enough, why is Google in Accra and not in any other city? The next point is to push the internet penetration up. It's definitely not from Accra and Kumasi, which already has fiber and very high coverage of 3G and 4G and all that. So it's still not clear what Google is trying to do in Accra and Kumasi. So maybe you can help us with that.
Thank you very much, Victor. Victor is a good friend of mine, actually, so I know where this question is coming from. Okay, to answer your question, what is Google doing in Accra and Kumasi? Before we came to Accra, I personally, at the time when we started the project, a lot of people were still complaining about good quality fiber infrastructure in the country. So yes, maybe there might have been some fiber infrastructure, but what we've done is a very extensive network to reach, most of the city and even to the outskirts. So as we speak now, we're building to the likes of Dorinya, OEB, and Kaswa. So what we are trying to do here is not to compete with the MNOs. Definitely that is not our aim. Our aim is to work with the MNOs and the ISPs to provide the infrastructure to the end user. Now, to your second question about why are we not building in other cities, it's still a work in progress. You start off obviously with the big cities because that is where most of the traffic is going to come from. As time goes on and other cities get bigger, we'll definitely expand our network to all those cities as well. So I hope that answers your question, Victor.
My name is David Gowe again. Just a follow-up to the same question. Okay. Do you have plans to move into backbone? And also, do you have plans to get districts, capitals, and regional capitals covered, not only the big cities?
So, first question, yes, the backbone is something that we're working on at the moment, and hopefully we should get that done by the end of Q1 2018. What we're trying to do as part of infrastructure sharing is probably do a fiber swap with one of either the big MNOs or ISPs. So we're not looking to build our own backbone between, say, Accra and Kumasi or any other capital cities. Probably just do a fiber swap with that. Regarding the other districts, yes, obviously we have plans of expanding our network, and it's a progressive thing. So obviously we'll start with the big cities, and then as we go on, we'll look into the other districts as well. So.
All right, hi, Kweku. My name is Nana Piakwe. I work with NCR. You touched briefly on Ghana's penetration rate, which stands at 34%.
Correct.
And you described it as very low and said, yes, we can do better. I just wanted to find out from you, what is the cost? What's the cost of this, the low penetration rate? Is it policy? Is it cost of the internet itself or the infrastructure? And what can be done for our internet penetration to go up to meet up with the global rate now?
Okay.
That will be our last question.
Okay. So for me, and this is just my personal opinion, I think that the cost, and that's what I gave the example earlier, that when I was in the UK with $50, I could get triple play. Here in Ghana, I'm just getting internet for $50. So for me, I think cost is a huge barrier to this penetration. Also, Africa, our GNI is quite low. I showed you what our gross national income was in relation to buying internet. So whilst people could use, their pocket change to get internet easily in the UK or the US or any other developed countries, here in Ghana, it takes a substantial amount of money to get internet. So I think that accounts for the low penetration in Ghana. What can be done? I think it's already been done. At the moment, I know the wholesale broadband costs are coming down. ultimately, we're hoping that those cost savings will be passed on to the end user. Shared infrastructure is one of the ways that we will be looking to try and reduce those costs as well. So a lot of is being done. For me, I think government policy will definitely drive that as well. In addition to the ISPs and MNOs passing those savings that they are making onto the end user. So that's my take on how to reduce those costs.
Thank you very much, Koko. Please, let's give him a big round of applause. Thank you. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll now move to the third part, the third presentation. And the title is 5G for the Networked Society. 5G for the Networked Society. And we have a representative from Ericsson Ghana, Charlie Sekakoni, to help us do that presentation. Please, let's give him a round of applause. Before that, the self-line is in now, so let me just, they are going to project it. I've asked that they project it so that you can see the password to use, and then you can browse. Thank you.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, Chairman, for giving us the opportunity to be here today. And sorry, I have to compete with the drums, but that's fine. I'm a good dancer as well. So please, could I have my slides? Society is an ecosystem. An ecosystem, we talk about people, we talk about technology, policies, and this ecosystem is basically where we have connectivity, driving change in communities, driving change in businesses. And from this slide, you can see that there's lots of things that we can connect. And at Ericsson, we believe that anything that needs a connection will be connected in the future. And that is what will form the network society. Next. Today, we stand on the edge of a revolution, a technology revolution that's going to change our world forever. And 5G is going to be a key driver for the network society, and it's going to be going to start, it's already eating in the market share of GSM and Edge and 3G, and it will be the dominant technology in the next 5 years. Next slide, please. This slide shows that in our region, Sub-Saharan Africa, GSM, Edge, the 2G technology, is still the dominant technology. And right now, it actually, by the end of this year, which is next month, GSM Edge is basically accounting for 50% of all subscriptions. But by 2023, the next 5 years, we see that 3G and LTE are going to be the dominant technologies with almost 90% subscriptions, and 2G will fall down to 2%. So it's clear that we're talking about 5G, but the dominant technology is still going to be 4G and 3G, because the operators still have to sweat their assets. They still have to make money from the investments they've already made. And 4G, as we know it, actually, we have not yet seen the 4G the way it was meant to be, because we still have 4G Advanced, which will give us speeds of up to 1 gig. We have 4G Advanced Pro, which will go up to 3 gigabit per second. So we haven't yet used the full potential of 4G LTE. Sorry, just go back a bit. This slide is just to give you some numbers on what we see in Africa. And right now, in 2017, the mobile subscriptions in sub-Saharan Africa, we have 700 million mobile subscriptions. And by 2023, that is going to have grown to 990 million. But the biggest change, the biggest change is going to happen with the mobile broadband subscriptions. And here we see that right now we have 350 million, but that is going to grow by almost 2.5 times to 880 million mobile broadband subscriptions. And this is going to be, this is the driving force behind the network society as we know it right now, before 5G becomes mature. Next slide, please. The network society, of course, would be nothing without the devices. And right now, what we see in our market in sub-Saharan Africa is that 50% of all devices are still feature phones, and we only have 50% smartphones. But in the next 5 years, we'll see smartphone subscription go up to 85%, eating into the feature phones. We're doing away with those because they don't support the network society the way we see it. And of course, in the next 5 years as well, data is going to explode fivefold. Next slide, please. Now, talking about 5G. 5G is going to be use case driven. And like my colleague from Nokia mentioned earlier, there are 3 key areas that are pushing the development of 5G. And here we see massive machine type communications, or massive MIMO to some people. And this is going to be characterized by low-cost devices which consume low power and just need transmit very small volumes of data. And these devices will be able to have a battery life of up to 10 years. And just to give you an example, smart parking. Smart parking, you probably have a sensor that is monitoring whether a parking slot is free or not. And in this case, it will only need to send data when the slot is empty. So that's how these devices will be able to actually sustain battery for up to 10 years. Then we have the critical machine type communication. This is going to be categorized by ultra reliable, low latency communications. And this is applicable to areas like smart health, where you can do remote surgeries, and this is all falling in the critical MTC area. Then we have the enhanced mobile broadband. This is more applicable to the humans, and will mean that we are actually able to support big speeds compared to today's throughput. With this, we're talking of more than 10 gig over the wireless to an individual. And this is going to be applicable to the operators. The operators are looking at this keenly because it's very, very applicable to their area of operation. Next slide, please. This is an interesting statistic, considering that 5G is still in its infancy. Standards are not yet concluded. We hope that standards will be finalized mid-next year. But by 2023, we expect to see up to 1 billion 5G subscriptions. But for Africa, the first subscriptions will happen in 2022. Because at the moment, 5G is not very relevant for the African market, and that's reality. But like I mentioned, the first commercial networks of 5G, based on the 5G new radio standard, based on the standard that will be concluded next year, will start appearing in 2020, but the pre-standard deployments will start happening from next year. We expect to see pre-standard deployments for the World Cup in Russia, 2018, the Winter Olympics in Korea. All those will be showcases for the pre-standard 5G technology. Next slide, please. IoT. IoT is not just about 5G. IoT is already with us today. And IoT, the various technologies that IoT is based on. But what has been pushed by the 3GPP is the narrowband IoT, which is driving the deployments that we have at the moment. And it's based on LTE technology. So it's using the benefits or the ecosystem that the current LTE technology has already set up. And the top industries that will drive IoT, energy, the energy sector, smart meters, smart grid, health industry, remote surgeries as an example, and then, of course, manufacturing. Those are going to be the three key industries for IoT. And you realize that these fall in two of the areas that we talked about, the massive machine type communication that will support manufacturing, for example, then the critical machine type communication, which will support the healthcare, because here you need technology that supports, that's very reliable and has very, very low latency, because these are critical operations that you're doing. Next, please. Yeah, this is just to give you an idea of the revenues that we're looking at for 5G. And by 2026, we expect that the revenue, that the valuation of this market will be up to 242 billion. And of course, to the operators, how they get a share of this will depend on how they position themselves in relation to the market. They could position themselves as an IoT connectivity provider, basically just being a pipe, or a service enabler, enabling other enterprise customers to deliver services to the end user, or they could be a service creator. And this is going to take the biggest share of this revenue, where they provide end-to-end services from an IoT perspective. Next, please. Drilling down further in sub-Saharan Africa, the revenue that of the 242 million, only 12.7 is what is forecast to be for sub-Saharan Africa. And the majority of this, as we saw earlier, will be for the energy, manufacturing, and the health sectors. These are the three key industries that will support the Internet of Things. Next, please. Yeah, like I mentioned earlier, how the operators position themselves in relation to IoT will determine how much of the cake they eat. And you can see of the 12.7 billion, the biggest share goes to the market, to the role of service creator, because this is where an operator creates services and does the marketing basically end to end. That is going to take the biggest chunk of the money. Next, please. What are the key takeaways from this presentation? The key takeaway is that GSM Edge is still relevant to our market. And it's only going to the market share in the next 5 years will be 12%, but right now it's 50%. So it's very relevant to our market, sub-Saharan Africa, because of the low purchasing power. And then 4G will be the dominant, 4G LTE will be the dominant technology in the next 5 years. And this is why that at the moment, most of the vendors, the Nokias, the Ericssons, what they're doing, they're building 5G technology, 5G concepts into the current 4G LTE technology. So 4G LTE is going to dominate for the next 5 years. Then 5G, again, 5G is going to be the accelerator of the network society. But for now, the precursor is 4G LTE for the network society, but 5G will be the accelerator, and of course, with the compelling use cases that operators can come up with, it will open up interesting revenue streams for them. Next slide, please. Sorry, I've run out of slides. Yes.
Thank you.
I have with me a colleague of mine who will be taking the hard questions, but you can start with the simple ones.
Thank you very much, Charles. Please let's give Charles a big round of applause. Thank you. We need to pray for Africa to move faster. Can we take a few questions if there are any? Any questions? Okay. Please. She's the only lady who is asking a question. Let's give her a big round of applause, please.
Good afternoon. I'm Emanuela Ontoyin. I represent SYND, Civil Society. And I have some issues to put forward. The first is the cost of 5G to our environment. What is the extent of the effects? And then also, we hear that devices have radiations. So what is the health of these 5G devices on our health as humans when we purchase their phones and we use them? Could you throw more light? Thank you.
If you could ask the first question again, I didn't get it clearly.
So I'm asking of the cost of 5G, like putting, I don't know, fiber, yes, on the environment. What's the cost? Like
On
cost
the
analysis,
environment.
yes, on the environment.
Okay. Taking your first question, 5G shouldn't really have an impact on the environment because it's going to ride on the existing infrastructure, which is also being ramped up to handle the speeds that 5G promises. So you're not going to see any different fiber cables being laid. No, the same infrastructure will be able to support 5G. And then when it comes to your second question was about the impact on health issues. Well, 5G is going to be using the same frequencies as the existing technologies. There are different bands that are being discussed, and some of them are already being used by the current 2G, 3G, 4G technologies. We're talking about below 6 gig, and then we have 24 gig, 28 and 38 being discussed as well. These are frequencies that are already being used by microwave transmission, and there's no issue. It's debatable, yes, but there's no issue.
Okay. Any other question? Okay.
Okay. My question is, you said there are 3 drivers for IoT and 5G. That is energy and utility, manufacturing and health.
The main industries.
Yes.
For IoT.
Okay. Can you say that's also for sub-Saharan Africa?
Yes, I would say that, but not in the next 5 years. Because if you look at markets like China, where industrialization has...
no, I want sub-Saharan.
Yes, I'm coming to Africa.
Okay.
We saw a lot of industrialization in China, in the Asian tigers over the last few years, yeah, because they had low labor. Labor was quite cheap. But now manufacturing, because the labor cost in those countries is going up, manufacturing is going to move to Africa. And key to that is going to be automation. And then we'll talk about IoT. So that's why those 3 industries have a case in Africa. And then when you look at health, we have, you have certain presidents of some countries going to the UK for treatment. Maybe they could have remote surgery. So okay. There's a case. And that's why for Africa, those 3 actually make a case in the next 5 years when the standard is mature.
What I'm thinking is in terms of agriculture, okay, because almost all African countries have potential so far as agriculture is concerned. Is there no consideration with looking at the
yes.
agriculture sector with respect to IoT and 5G?
Yes, agriculture is one of the industries as well, but it's not among the top 3. There are already trials being done in Saudi Arabia and Turkey related to agriculture, irrigation, but agriculture is one of the industries. Just not as big as the 3 that I mentioned, but in the chart that was shown, agriculture was there, smart agriculture. I actually encourage you to go to our website, ericsson.com. You will be able to download this report. It's available, no cost. and it has lots of detail, with 5G being a key message in there.
Thank you.
Any hand from that side? Any other question? Okay, thank you very much, Charles. Please let's give Charles another round of applause as he takes his seat. Once again, I would like to say a very big thank you to GridCo for supporting this very all-important forum. GridCo. Ladies and gentlemen, I consulted or conferred with the chairman, and the chairman has agreed that we have the first session of the panel discussion. We'll just have the first session of the panel discussion, and then we'll go for a break and come back to continue with the other three. And so if you agree with me, I would want us to get ourselves ready. We can get up and shake ourselves a bit. You know, there's water on in front of you. We have some toffees as well. So if you need more, just let me know. I'll bring you more. Okay. So we're going to have the panel discussion now, the first panel discussion now. And this is going to be moderated by my own brother, Evans Boa Mensah, and Ebenezer Ampedu. Okay, Evans, I think I would leave this one for you to come and handle, yes. And then he will introduce the other discussants for this first session of our panel discussion. Let's welcome him with a round of applause. So the Surfline ID, and then the password is Surfline at 4321. I'm sorry? It's not working. Oh. We'll sort it out before we.
Hello? Okay. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Evans Boa Mensah, and I know I'm the one standing in between your lunch. But forgive me, digitalization, we all know, is really placing unprecedented pressure on government and institutions to evolve. At present, I'm quoting Standard & Poor's. A research they conducted recently stated that 50% of businesses today will be gone by 2027. That means in the next 10 years, most of the businesses that we see today, we will see no more. That means managing our collective transition to a digitally economy is vital and crucial to our quest for a prosperous Ghana. That's all good, but there are some of the challenges and barriers to creating a fully digitally enabled Ghana, and some of the best practice that we can import from elsewhere to help us leapfrog our digitalization efforts. To help me address this challenge, I have Mr. Ebenezer Ampadu. He's worked in various roles in the sales and distribution capacity in West Africa for the past 14 years, specializing in the telecoms and mobile financial services sector. He's currently the commercial director for Surfline, where he's leading a young and enthusiastic team who are working to redefine the boundaries in broadband communications in the Ghanaian market. Ladies and gentlemen, with a round of applause, let's welcome Mr. Ebenezer Ampadu. You're welcome very much, sir. My second guest is Dr. Isa Oseye Boaboatin. He's a professional telecoms engineer with over 25 years of experience. Again, with a round of applause, may we please welcome Mr. Isaiah Boaboatin. You're very much welcome, gentlemen. I think I want to start with Mr. Isaiah Boatin. When we say fully digital enabled Ghana, please take us through. What do we mean?
All right. Thank you for the opportunity. When we say fully digitized Ghanaian economy or setting, basically what we're talking about is e-everything. So in terms of e-learning, in terms of e-business, and so typically dovetailing it into what the government is doing today with digital addressing, with respect to the ports, paperless, and then even at the ministries, paperless kind of transactions and for everything that they do. And then you could translate that into the day-to-day user. So if you need e-centric services or digital-based services such as procuring your passport, procuring your ID, Ghana ID, your driver's license, almost everything that you do. And in respect of the small to medium enterprises, also that their transactions would also purely be based on the digital environment. So in a nutshell, when we talk about fully digitized system or economy, basically with the ordinary users, with the SMEs, and with the large corporations, as well as government services, all of them digitized.
So does that mean it involves only government institutions, private sector, or both?
I think it cuts across everybody. That's why I'm bringing in the end users, ordinary end users. It also cuts into even students. You know, I also come from academia. So with students using e-platforms to access their notes in learning, in practically doing everything. Today we even have virtual labs. So we not, in all the things, I come from computing and information systems, and some of our labs are virtual labs. So the students can log in with their computers and they are able to have lab sessions, you know, other than physically having typical machines and dealing with those machines or systems in the physical. But they can access those in the virtual system, which is e-everything, or the digital environment that we're talking about. So when we're able to have almost every facet of our lives, again, emphasis on procuring services, whether it's government services and then also interacting with other businesses. That's why I bring in the SMEs, the small to medium enterprises, and then even the large corporations, because the large corporations, they are doing it. So when the small businesses are able to join into that, then we can expect to have fully digitized environment.
Oh, okay. Mr. Ampadu, are we ready to digitalize Ghana?
I'll say yes and no. I'll say yes because we have a conversation of access. and some parts of the country have access to the ability to have the digitalization work. So today we have urban coverage for data, for the country to become electronically connected across all lifestyles. We need people to have access to the infrastructure. The infrastructure is in certain areas, not the entire country. With that said, some people are going to be part of that digital or electronic conversation, and others would come along later. You know, development does not come at once. It goes through phases and it goes through cycles as well. When it comes to people, or when it comes to a whole country, you start from somewhere, you deploy to other areas. So I'll say that if the government's current agenda on connecting or e-governance, e-port, across all facets of our lives is being driven from the government space. It will happen in the urban areas first, where people have access to that infrastructure. Then it will move to the rural areas when the infrastructure grows to meet those areas as well. So basically, that is what is going to happen. So we are ready in some areas, but some areas would have to lag behind because of the infrastructure availability.
Okay. So what do you think we need to do to fast track the deployment of data technology base?
I would say that today we are quote unquote in the right direction in terms of the government supporting such a forum. And then when it comes to the discussion around policy is the first part of ensuring that we fast track that development agenda. Then the second phase is supporting the players within the space to ensure that as the policy is in place, they are working towards that agenda. And then I'll give an example. In some places it's been done where you have a master plan which is developed in phases. So for that to happen in this country, first of all, you hear discussions around licensing of operators. Today, when the NCA presenter was talking, he talked about the MNOs, he talked about the broadband wireless companies, he talked about ISPs. And these institutions are licensed to operate in a market, which is very competitive. There are barriers in the ways of the players that it will take government support in terms of incentives to ensure that those barriers are removed for players in the industry to thrive and grow. So for us to become digitally connected across all the spectrums, it takes the players and the government as well to make that happen.
And Mr. Yeboah Boateng, which of the sectors do you really think is being really disrupted by technology?
Difficult. When we talk about technology, basically the internet itself is said to be a disruptive technology. And it's not always, when we say disruptive technology, it's not exactly just connoting something bad, but something that changes things. So even the government's agenda, it could be disruptive technology for some people, those who were benefiting from the paper-based transactions and could have their way through that. So then the whole agenda of digitized everything, it becomes a disruptive technology. What I see personally, and then probably because of my background as a cybersecurity expert, cybersecurity or cybercrime becomes a key concern with all these digitized environments. So it is something that we need to take very good care of. The very fundamental part, with what my colleague was just saying, it's with respect to policy. And the policy also goes along with things as basic as training, as education, as awareness. So in security, we call something SETA, security, education, training, and awareness. And this is fundamental. Some people do not even understand certain things. You know, let me give you a typical example. You go to a forum like this and you see a free wireless, sometimes, you know, let me give you maybe called, the wireless access is called virus. And there are some of us, once you see it's unsecured, free, wireless, Wi-Fi, whatever, you would connect. I would not. Why not? I like freebies. But if you understand the things we could do behind the scenes, with you accessing the freebie. So what I tell people is, you know, it's free, but you pay with something. Maybe you're paying with your data. Because behind the scenes, we can collect your data. You know, and this is a reality. So there is the need, whilst we go to the digital environment, to educate ourselves, to create the awareness that it's a very good technology, but it could be very disruptive if the users, the end users, which is the weakest link in the security chain, remain there. Because whilst the end users remain unsophisticated, the hacking community is constantly evolving and becoming more sophisticated. And there is also easy tools. Today, if you want to learn the tools for the trade of cybercrime, you don't need anything to do that. It's very, the entry barrier is very easy. You just need to know how to copy exploits. You know, ordinary words would be viruses, and how to disseminate them. So, if you ask me about the disruptive nature of whatever we're doing in terms of the digitization, I would put it on security, education, training, and awareness. And if we're able to create that, then our people become tech savvy to some extent, that you don't just take anything, you just don't click anything. You receive a text message telling you that you've won some lottery, and then you need to follow that, and so on and so forth. This is awareness that would move us away from making the technology behaving like it's disruptive in the negative sense. There's a lot of positive aspects of it that we can harness.
Okay. You mentioned security. Mr. Ampadu initially talked about policies. These are two challenges you've noted. However, I still want you to educate us the sectors which are actually embracing the digital agenda and are actually moving fast. We have the financial services sector, the other sectors are there. Which ones are actually embracing it, and which ones are lagging behind, which we need to do something about?
I think presently, with what the government is doing, some what we call citizen-centric services, like the Ghana ID, which is going to be rolled out soon, the Ghana Post GPS, the port system. There is also the e-business in terms of registration for your businesses and so on. When I think the driver's license is also launched. So things like this, and then also when we get the passport, I'm not quite sure whether that one has also been launched as yet or not. So when we get these services moving, ultimately we are on the right path to get the entire ecosystem, because it starts from these basics, especially with the ID. And then you could have digitization, so that when you go anywhere to access maybe any form of services, we know where you are, because you could be tracked easily, and then creating a common database. So this is the way I think it should go. So if I understand your question, this is the areas where it's already taken off.
And Mr. Ampadu, you talked about policies. You are in the industry to make broadband access available to some of us. What are some of the policies that are facilitating your business, and what are some of the policies that are actually hindering your progress?
Okay, so I'll talk about two things. I think the policy around the licensing regime in the beginning made it very good for other operators to enter into the space. But then there are two aspects to it. There is most of the BBWAs were issued capacity licenses. I'm talking about the LTE space. Were issued capacity-based licenses, which cost 3 times as much to deploy as the coverage license. So to cover Accra, parts of Accra, the number of sites that we needed to cover parts of Accra, with a different frequency, we would have covered the whole country, or at least all the regional capitals. So what happens is that when you are provided with such a facility, your operating costs become so high that it's become very challenging, basically, to just even break even and become viable. Whilst you operate in a market that's not a green field, because there are also other services. The other challenge also for BBWAs is that our devices had not advanced. The devices on the market, when you get information on the penetration of LTE-capable devices, smartphones today is 6 million. But then when you come to smartphone, you're talking about big screen, 3G connectivity. Within that is the LTE phones, which will be way lower than the 3G phones. So with new technology, it comes with a lot of barriers. And what would have really, really made a big difference for most BBWAs was that the licensing regime should have been such that you get, most probably, you get one block for the capacity and you have one shared for the coverage. So we all sort of operate in that space. And then I'll say that for the consumer, when you join an LTE network, the experience is different from when you're on a 3G network. I keep using this as an analogy. The average customer on 3G will be spending anything between maybe 50 cedis a month. Let's say hypothetically, 50 cedis a month will give him maybe 6 gigabytes of data. The whole month he'll be fine if he's not a very heavy user. When you come to in the LTE space, where you buy the same bandwidth with the capacity that is available, within a matter of hours, the data is all gone. Because when you are streaming something like YouTube, you can watch HD quality without buffering. And sites like YouTube sort of look at the capacity you have and then do dynamic management of the bandwidth on their side. So when you don't set it at default and you are just HD, you connect and you are gone. So basically what I'm saying is this. There are two sides. The licenses were beautiful, were given out, but then there should have been another step where the government made it easier for BBWAs to have coverage licenses as well. Because basically what we are providing is data, we're not doing voice. That way, when we are out there and we are deploying, we become very cost effective and we become viable. And we sort of also advance the agenda for the country becoming digitalized. Because what is going to happen is that the need for data is going to grow. It's becoming very demanding. Today, everywhere you go, people have smartphones and they are either capturing videos or images and posting. People are actually capturing their own crimes and uploading it into the internet. And the crime that they commit, they sort of give themselves up because somebody will go and rob and you'll be posting video. I saw a video recently. Some people robbed the bank in Kenya and then one of the robbers' girlfriend uploaded a video of herself with money strewn all over the place on Snapchat and was sent to the police and he got arrested. So basically, everybody is sort of embracing a digital agenda. We are making that possible. But for us to make that possible for the long term, it needs to be said that regulation should make it viable for us to be in that space. That is on frequency and spectrum conversation. Then there's also another conversation for most of us in the space as well. We have a triopoly in terms of the infrastructure share and the tower companies. In our case, a typical case of those of us on the 2.5 frequency, where we need a lot more towers to cover the country, we have to be on a lot of towers. So the 3 tower companies will send their bill every month, and you have to pay. So everybody will look at you and say, oh, you guys are doing well. I'm enjoying the service. But at what cost? Is it sustainable? Those are some of the things that we always need to have a look at when you are sort of setting up institutions or providing service or license regimes for operators in the market. one of the rules on one of the requirements on the license was that you are supposed to cover the whole country within a certain period of time. With a capacity site that covers about 700 meters, imagine covering the whole country with towers. So basically, what I'm saying is this: when the regulator was issuing us the licenses and providing us with that support to be able to do the service, just as we talked about allowing the rural coverage with the on UTMS conversation that just happened earlier, something like that should be in place for the BBWAs who are still on the LTE, who had the bandwidth, the capacity network, so that they can also extend coverage, reach new people, for other people to also enjoy the experience and make them more viable for the long term. That's basically what I'll say to that.
All right. Dr. Yabwabwati, from your experience and on our journey to digitalize our economy, what are some of the roadblocks that you have seen or you think have remained surprisingly resilient that ought to be removed?
I think when one of the presenters, I don't know whether, I think it's C-Squared, that somebody asked whether they've had the challenge of cable cuts, and he said yes, almost every now and then. Admittedly, that is one key challenge for service providers, and that could be a key challenge. In respect of government side, I know as a member of NITA board that every now and then we've had instances of cable cuts almost every week. So it means that it remains a key challenge and a bottleneck to the process of digitization of the economy. If you take, for instance, that of the government sectors, and with this infrastructure and being cut almost every day, so whenever it's being cut, there is, in terms of security, we call it availability. So there's unavailability. So whether it's for 2 seconds or 1 week or 1 hour, it still affects, in terms of the business side, the money, the revenue that is being generated. So it's a loss of revenue. So if we're able to address some of these things, and I know that a lot has gone on in terms of best standards, in terms of when you lay the cable, the tapings and so on, but for some reason, because there's still construction in our sector, some of the road construction, or anybody can just wake up in front of his house, or you wake up in front of your house and somebody is digging. And no permission, he would dig across the entrance of your own house. And for a couple of days, if you don't take care, you don't go and get some slabs, you probably cannot drive in and out of your own house. So again, we need to extend the policy to include other players. So is it the MMDAs who take care of the environment, or the EPAs and so on, to be sure that, or even the highways and so on, so that when some of these things are being done, they will check up with the institutions in terms of the telcos and so on. So again, it makes this forum becomes a very handy, because they can have the information of all these infrastructure that has been laid in terms of the mappings and so on, so that when there's a new construction and they consulted the forum can now show them that, okay, if you're constructing across this side of Spintex Road, be careful here, or we would send one of our engineers to assist you so that you don't cut our cable and so on. So this forum becomes handy in addressing some of these concerns that have stayed with us. The other aspect is also the costs of the service, the infrastructure. Because the service providers spend so much high cost in laying out these infrastructure, obviously they also need to recoup from the end users, and it makes it unaffordable, and it makes it also a way of inhibiting whatever the agenda of digitization, because if almost everybody could afford, then obviously people would sign up into these services and enjoy the services and whatever benefits that come with it.
And Mr. Ampedu, how do we shape the industry in such a way that it becomes attractive to almost every stakeholder?
Okay, so I think players in the industry have peculiar needs. And like I said earlier, the biggest decider in all this is the regulator, or the referee. So what I'll say is that when it comes to regulation, because regulation is progressive, we've gotten to a point where we are at a crossroads for players in the sector. So what should happen is that the regulator is a very listening regulator, and the engagement with the regulator has been quite cordial, let me put it that way. So what should happen is that we should still have these type of discussions, and then when we give the regulator feedback, or we give the supervisory ministry feedback, they come in, sit down with us, judge with us, and then we agree on a roadmap, and then we work hand in hand into delivering that roadmap. If that happens, I'm very sure that the digitization agenda would advance rapidly. That is basically what I'll say. So it's mainly a combination between players in the market and the regulator and the government itself working together on an agreed roadmap and sticking to it and supporting each other to make the digitization of this country happen. That's basically the formula.
Mr. Iwabatin, what are some of the things that we can actually learn from other countries and then implement in Ghana to help us fast track our digitalization efforts?
Okay. One of the things is probably to assist in terms of regulation to speed up, either by way of some of the fees, you know, to revise and so on, and then also obviously it will trickle down to the end users. In other jurisdictions, I think one of the presenters, again, probably Kweku, when he was presenting, made mention of when he was in UK, he paid either £50 or something for triple play. I have had, I don't know what date line, but in between 2000 and 2004, when I was also on the other side, I paid $23 for triple play from Comcast in Northern Virginia. So, and this is it. You have voice for the tri-state, and then you have your TV, and you have internet. So what we can learn is also to encourage our service providers, you know, by being able to beat down the prices. So if it becomes affordable to the extent that we could spend, say, 50 cedis to have a triple play, obviously it's going to enhance the services, and even to get it down. I'm saying 50 cedis because 50 cedis today may also be difficult for some people to afford per month. But if we even started at that level, obviously we could, and then as time goes on, when the prices are supposed to come down, and then start coming down to some saturation point, by which time we can have a lot of digital inclusion so that most people would join. The other point that I need to make is we need to start with the high-end technologies, because again and again, alluding to one of the presenters,
get a new policy where you are allowed to also do voice over IP. And also, my second question is, what about looking at the bottom of the pyramid? Today in Accra and the big cities, we have so many broadband service providers. But according to some of the statistics we've seen, some of the statistics shown, we have only 34% internet penetration, which means that we still have a lot of people we have not covered. Do you think that a policy review that will give you some incentives to go to some of these areas will solve the problem? Thank you.
Okay, so I'll answer your first question first. Your second question first. So you talked about the underserved areas. With the technology we have, there's not been any proven case that you can use that in the underserved areas. Most underserved areas you need to serve with maybe satellite technology or radio. The challenge with those underserved areas is that you do not have enough concentration of people, because telecom is about aggregation of people, and you aggregate the traffic and everybody contributes to your operating costs. Then if you have enough people, you make a margin, or you make a viable margin on that particular infrastructure that you've installed. So when you talk about the areas without coverage, if you go to my village, where there are cottages dotted around, and every cottage has about 3 or 4 people, and the average income is during the cocoa season when money comes into their pockets. It means that when you put any infrastructure there, you only get some money from October up to March. The rest of the year, you will not be getting anything. And you have to pay your licenses to the providers. You have to pay your regulators. You have to pay. There's a lot of operating costs that comes to it. So when it comes to underserved areas, it doesn't make a good business case to do the underserved areas. In the area of policy, I think this forum and the conversation we are having here is geared towards shaping the policy direction such that it becomes the regulator, the government listens to us who are players in the industry, and they change or they adapt some of the existing rules to favor us and keep us viable. I think I'll always refer to GIFEX, where it's about development of infrastructure in rural areas and delivery of service in rural areas. This agenda is usually being driven, even though it's being driven by the government, it is the operators that are benefiting. They put a tower in the place, they say, oh, come and put your equipment on it. We'll take care of A, B, C, D bills. And sort of support you to deliver the service to those underserved communities. That are some of the things that we are talking about in our space that will make it viable for BBWAs. When it comes to voice, I think voice is dying. Let me be very honest. Most operators today in this market are still making a lot of their revenue from voice. But their data is growing. The data revenues and the data traffic is really growing. So if you have data today, you don't even need a voice from a BBW. You can call on either WhatsApp voice, you can do Viber, you can do Skype, you can do Facebook. I'm just mentioning a few of the over-the-top layers. So for us, the root is not voice. The root is frequency availability that would make, or spectrum availability, that will make our business case a bit more viable and make us a bit more viable for the long term. That's basically it for in our space, those of the BBWAs who were granted the capacity licenses.
Thank you very much. 2 more questions. 2 more.
Yeah, thank you. I'm Raymond Foley. I like your last submission, COMSIS. I like your last submission on the issue of spectrum. Indeed, from where we sit, spectrum aren't going to be available for us. But with what you have, what strategies do you have in place to cover the underserved? Whatever the case is, we keep talking about bridging the digital divide. With what we have, how can we do that? That is what I think that we should be talking about. Nobody's going to offer a frequency up to anybody, like maybe for your company for free. It comes at a cost. Adding that to your already existing costs, it means that you are increasing your costs over a period of time. What would you do now with what you have to cover the underserved? Thank you very much.
Okay, so basically, we are exploring options in the satellite space. We are an ISP, we have an ISP license, and nothing is preventing us from using satellite and radio, microwave technology to cover the underserved areas. So we are basically serving areas we don't have LTE coverage today with microwave technology as well.
Yes, but you talked about the fact that cost is an impediment, especially in underserved areas. Satellite, we know, is very expensive. How do you want to maneuver your way through that?
So when you talk about underserved areas, you're not talking about individuals, because we talk about enterprises and businesses that have the capacity to afford the bandwidth. When you talk about individuals, like I said, the individuals have so many options. There's 2G coverage in most rural areas. There's 3G coverage in every, I can say for a fact that every district capital and major towns above a certain population, there's 3G coverage in practically every part of the country. So when somebody is requesting a service that is beyond, ours is big capacity, it's beyond the 2G and the 3Gs, then we go with microwave technology or we go with satellite technology, basically.
Last question. Last question.
Thank you. I see the whole conversation hovering around cost, cost, cost. I'm thinking to myself, moving forward, beyond here and the conversation, will it not be prudent for us to have a fund, a specialized fund that will go to support the sustainability of this conversation that we are having?
Dr. Ibuavati, I think you should take this.
I think GIFEC and Co would want to handle this one. Absolutely. This one will have to go to GIFEC and not the private.
Well, it's about funding, and right, that's true. It's about funding. And GIFEC, there's already a fund. It's called GIFEC. But the challenge is that in the establishment of universal service funds across the world, the contributions is evenly spread. So if you go to Nigeria, for instance, even companies that deal in ICT equipment, they contribute towards the universal service fund. In Ghana, it is only the licensed mobile telecom company. And so today, we are only funded through contributions from MTN, Vodafone, Tigo, Airtel. Glo has been so many. As for my Kasapa, doesn't it? You know, so the challenge we also have as a universal service fund is that we have members of the industry forum sitting on our board. And so it's like, and we always have a quarrel with them. After contributing the money, they say it is our money, and we say it's government's money. So, and MNO would not understand why they are contributing, and you are using their money to deploy or fund activities that will go a long way to support the business of another entity that does not make any contribution. But yes, there is a fund already. So in terms of policies, what do we need to do as a country? If the government can then look at the law that established GIFEC again and say that, yes, we are opening up the space for infracos, for other ICT dealers, for media houses, anybody involved in broadcasting to contribute to GIFEC, the fund. Then we'll have a larger purse, and then we can fund some of these things.
Bonus question.
Well, the question I want to ask is, GIFEC is doing a great job. But assuming you have like 100 of these sites, what would be the capacity need for you to maintain them? Is there a strategy after some time you hand it over to some of these ISPs with capacity to take over those kind of sites and still continue? I mean, it will depend on the capacity and the opportunities that exist in those areas after maintaining it for some time, is there is there a way that, or a strategy that you have that in future you can hand it over and go to those areas that are underserved? Or you intend to hold on to those ones that you've started and keep on holding it on till when?
I have suddenly become part of the panel. This morning I mentioned that GIFEC was established as GIFTEL. And so at the time, there was a serious challenge in terms of deployment of towers. You remember there was serious proliferation. Sometimes I have a difficulty in pronouncing such words. A serious proliferation of towers everywhere. And so EPA came out with a moratorium that, that even led to them asking the telecom companies to stop further deployment of towers. And so GIFEC, as a GIFTEL, as a fund, at the time realized that there was a need to do something to encourage co-location. And that was when we did our first deployment. And so those towers are things that we are still holding on to. Beyond that, whatever we do now is facilitating, because GIFEC as a fund is supposed to facilitate activities to bridge the digital gap. So whatever we do, like the 100 sites I mentioned this morning, we are working with an MNO. So when we do that, we facilitate and we don't own the infrastructure, we leave it to the MNO because we don't have the capabilities and whatever, the capacity to run those things. We are not a telecom infrastructure. Even our name is a misnomer. We say we are an investment fund for electronic communication. We are a universal service fund that facilitates the activities.
Thank you very much, and thank you, gentlemen, for sharing your industry experience with us. And to you especially, thank you. I know it's past lunchtime, but you've been kind enough with us and listening to us talk about how to digitalize Ghana. As we move out, let's keep the conversation going. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Let's give them a big round of applause. Eben, thank you very much. And Evans, thank you. Okay, so we are going for